What if the most beautiful buildings of the last century were never meant to be part of our history? What if they were the last relics of a lost empire, and their demolition was the final act in the greatest cover-up of all time? Look around any major city today, and you'll see a skyline of glass and steel. It's modern, efficient, and to many people, completely uninspired. But it wasn't always this way. Just over a century ago, our cities were crowned with architectural jewels, soaring towers of stone and marble, dripping with details so intricate it almost seems impossible. And then, one by one, they started to disappear. Take the Singer Building in New York City. Finished in 1908, it was a 612-foot masterpiece of Beaux-Arts design, and for a short time, the tallest building in the world. Its lobby was described as having a celestial radiance, a monument to an age of artistry. Yet just 60 years later, in 1968, it was torn down. At the time, it was the tallest building ever to be intentionally demolished. The official reason? Its slender tower and small floors were considered economically obsolete. It was replaced by the black, boxy One Liberty Plaza, a building with far more office space. The New York Times called the demolition a casualty of progress. But does that feel right to you? Do you trade a masterpiece for a filing cabinet? The Singer Building wasn't an isolated case. In New York, the original Pennsylvania Station, a breathtaking Roman temple of steel and travertine, was dismantled in 1963 to build an underground station and Madison Square Garden. Across the country, across the world, a pattern seems to emerge. The most beautiful and monumental structures of the so-called Gilded Age were systematically torn down. The official narrative is always the same: progress, economics, the need for something new. But a growing number of independent researchers are asking a very different question. What if this wasn't progress? What if it was a purge, a systematic demolition of our true heritage? This question leads down a rabbit hole to a name you won't find in any official history book: Tartaria, or the Tartarian Empire. According to a theory gaining incredible momentum online, Tartaria was a technologically advanced, worldwide civilization that has been deliberately erased from history. Proponents of this theory point to old maps from the 16th to the 19th centuries. These maps show a vast territory labeled Tartary or Great Tartary, covering much of Asia and Siberia. While historians will tell you this was just a generic European term for a poorly understood region inhabited by various nomadic tribes, the theory suggests something much grander. It claims this was the heart of a global empire that achieved feats of architecture we are only now beginning to appreciate. The theory suggests that the Tartarian Empire was responsible for a unified, global style of architecture, the grand, classical buildings we see in old photographs of every major city on Earth. From the U.S. Capitol to magnificent structures across Europe and Asia, the argument is that these weren't built by our recent ancestors with horse-drawn carts, but are the surviving remnants of a single, advanced, old-world civilization. And if an empire like that really existed, making it disappear would be the greatest secret in history. A secret that would require a massive, coordinated cover-up, a great reset of history itself. The core of the Tartarian theory lies in evidence that is, quite literally, set in stone. Look at the architecture of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Why do city halls in Philadelphia, Capitol buildings in Texas, and grand structures in Melbourne, Australia all share a similar ornate classical design? Historians identify this as Beaux-Arts or neoclassical, a popular style taught at prestigious schools in Paris and adopted worldwide. But the theory asks, was it just a popular style, or is it a signature, the architectural fingerprint of a single unified culture? Proponents urge you to look closer at old photographs. You'll often see these magnificent, colossal buildings towering over muddy, unpaved streets with only a few people and horse-drawn buggies scattered about. The scale seems all wrong. The official story is that our primitive ancestors built these incredible structures, but the context in the photos leads some to suggest they were found, not built. This leads to another key pillar of the theory, the mud flood. Theorists point to thousands of examples worldwide of old buildings with doors and windows buried many feet below the modern ground level. You can see it for yourself in the old parts of many cities, where you have to step down to the ground floor, and windows at street level are clearly just the tops of much larger windows buried below. The official explanation is that street levels were raised over centuries for infrastructure like sewers and repaving. But the mud flood theory proposes a more catastrophic event, a single global cataclysm that buried the lower levels of Tartarian cities in a thick layer of mud, depopulating vast areas. In this view, our recent ancestors simply moved into the upper floors of these pre-existing cities, slowly dug them out, and claimed them as their own, rewriting history in the process. What if these demolished towers weren't just beautiful buildings? What if they were functional machines? Here, the Tartarian theory ventures into the realm of lost technology. Look at the intricate spires, antennas, and metal domes that crowned so many of these old-world structures. Were they just for decoration, or were they, as some researchers now suggest, parts of a system for harvesting atmospheric energy? The idea of free, wireless energy is a recurring theme. The theory posits that the Tartarian civilization had mastered this, providing clean, limitless power to its cities. If this were true, demolishing these towers wasn't just erasing history, it was pulling the plug on a technology that could have made the modern energy industry obsolete. But the most audacious claim might revolve around the great world's fairs of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Think of the 1983 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, or the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition in San Francisco. We are told these magnificent white cities were temporary structures made of plaster and fiber over wooden frames, and then torn down after the fair ended. The Tartarian theory offers a chilling alternative. What if these weren't temporary fairs? What if they were rediscovered, pristine Tartarian cities, showcased to the world one last time before being torn down under the guise of being temporary? Look at the photos of the 1915 Tower of Jewels in San Francisco. A 435-foot-tall marvel, we are told it was a temporary structure made of plaster and burlap, torn down after the fair. But could something so vast and glorious truly have been built just to be destroyed less than a year later? Or was the fair the perfect excuse to tear down a relic of a past that a new world order wanted to forget? When you put all the pieces of the theory together, a narrative begins to form. A story of a coordinated, century-long effort to erase a chapter of human history. From this perspective, the demolition of the Singer Building wasn't just an economic decision, it was part of a pattern. The destruction of Gilded Age mansions wasn't just about changing fashions, it was about erasing the symbols of an inconvenient past. The theory suggests that major conflicts, particularly World War I and World War II, were instrumental in this reset. The extensive bombing campaigns that destroyed countless historic buildings across Europe are seen not just as tragic acts of war, but as a deliberate and effective method for wiping the slate clean. It all points to a great reset, a moment in the late 19th century when history was rewritten. By tearing down the towers and destroying the architecture, they severed our connection to this magnificent past. They left us with a history that is only a fraction of the real story, and a skyline that is a pale imitation of what once was. The official story tells us that magnificent buildings like the Singer Tower were destroyed for progress and profit. The historical record insists that the grand palaces of the world's fairs were nothing more than temporary plaster creations, and academics dismiss the entire Tartarian empire theory as pseudo-scientific fantasy born on the internet. But the questions remain. Why does the same impossible architecture appear in nearly every country on Earth? Why are so many old buildings partially buried, as if by a great flood of mud? And why were hundreds of the most beautiful structures ever built systematically demolished, often to be replaced by buildings of lesser beauty? We are not here to tell you what to believe. We are here to ask the questions. The feeling of loss many people have when they see a photo of the long-gone Penn Station or the Singer Building is real. It's a sense that we have been robbed of something, that our world is less magical than it once was. Maybe it's all just coincidence, or maybe it's the lingering echo of a lost empire, hidden in plain sight, its last towering relics torn down to ensure we never remembered to look up. What do you think? Is this all just a bizarre conspiracy theory, or are we standing on the ruins of a history they tried to bury? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe there are parts of our history that we aren't being told, make sure to do your own research. You might be surprised by what you find.